What if you woke up in a medieval asylum with no memory of how you got there? The year is 1347, and madness is treated with chains, cold stone cells, and cures that would horrify modern medicine. But why does everyone keep calling you by a name that isn't yours? And why do the monks seem terrified every time you speak? To understand what you're about to face, you need to know how you ended up here in the first place. Medieval diagnosis of madness was less medical science and more community vote. Local priests and authorities decided who was insane based on whatever behavior seemed disruptive or inconvenient. The definition was ridiculously broad. Prolonged grief, madness, a woman going through menopause, obviously insane. Epilepsy was demonic possession. Even being left-handed raised suspicions. Medieval authorities had the diagnostic skills of a magic 8-ball, but 10 times the confidence. Women got special treatment. Widows who cried too much, unmarried women who refused proposals, anyone too talkative or not talkative enough, all evidence of female hysteria. Being a woman was basically a pre-existing condition for crazy. No medical exams, no tests, just community gossip and public behavior. If enough neighbors complained about you, you could be dragged away in chains. The diagnostic process was like online reviews, except instead of bad restaurant ratings, you got lifetime imprisonment. Anyone could be declared insane for almost anything. Your survival depended on staying invisible and never upsetting the wrong people. One bad day, one enemy, one misunderstood moment, and you're here, chained to a stone wall, wondering how normal life became a nightmare so quickly. The accusations stuck like tar. Once someone whispered you might be mad, everyone watched for proof. Every odd behavior got magnified until the label became your identity. And once they had you trapped, the first thing you'd experience was waking up in hell. Not to sunlight or a gentle nudge, but to the bite of cold metal digging into your wrists. Heavy iron restraints were bolted straight to the bedposts, unforgiving and unpadded. At least modern handcuffs come with a hint of comfort. The medieval ones came with complimentary tetanus and a lifetime guarantee. Your bed wasn't really a bed. No mattress, no pillow. Just straw collecting bugs, dirt, and bodily fluids for who knows how long. 5-star hotels complain about thread count. Medieval asylums thought hay was luxury bedding with built-in wildlife entertainment. Guards woke patients by jabbing them with wooden sticks, hard pokes that left bruises. It was like the world's worst alarm clock, except snoozing got you beaten and there was no off button. If you resisted or complained, punishment came fast. Cold water splashed in your face. Sometimes entire buckets are dumped over your head in winter. Customer service complaints were handled with buckets of ice water instead of management. This was considered normal treatment. Guards believed they were helping by being harsh. Every morning started with pain, fear, and realizing yesterday wasn't a nightmare. And this was only the beginning of what they'd strip away from you. Patient clothing was passed down from person to person year after year. The same tattered tunics that previous patients had worn, sweated in, bled on, and died in. No washing between uses. It was like buying clothes from a thrift store where everyone died wearing them and the return policy was non-existent. Along with the filthy clothing, shoes were forbidden, belts too. Anything that could be used as a weapon was removed. Undergarments didn't exist for patients, just one coarse tunic that barely covered your body. Medieval fashion was apparently one size fits none, 0 accessories allowed, and the dress code was enforced by people with clubs. But the humiliation didn't stop at clothing. Hair got shaved off completely. Guards claimed this prevented lice, but really it was about control and degradation. They used dull razors that pulled and cut. Sometimes they'd leave patches to make patients look more disturbing to visitors. The barbers were apparently trained by people who cut grass with butter knives and learned anatomy from stick figures. Despite the hair shaving, body lice were everywhere anyway. These tiny insects lived in clothing seams and bedding. They bit constantly, causing intense itching and infection. The pest control method was basically giving everyone buzz cuts and hoping for the best. Adding to the misery was the overwhelming stench. Human waste mixed with sweat, mold, blood, and rotting food. Fresh air was considered dangerous for mad people, so windows stayed closed. Guards wore cloth over their noses when entering patient areas. After all this treatment, your reflection would be unrecognizable. Bald head, hollow eyes, torn clothing, and skin marked by restraints. The transformation stripped away your humanity piece by piece, and after they finished stripping away your dignity, your body would start demanding something even more basic. Breakfast wasn't served. It was dumped. Crusts of moldy bread sitting for days. Congealed stew with chunks of unidentifiable meat floating in grease. Water so thick with ash and dirt you couldn't see through it. The food was so bad that vultures would probably ask for a refund and file a complaint with the health department. Meals got thrown into wooden bowls or directly onto the floor. Patients ate with their hands because utensils were considered dangerous weapons. Apparently, forks were too risky, but starving people fighting over scraps was perfectly safe management. There was no eating schedule. Guards fed patients when they remembered or felt like it. Sometimes meals came 3 times a day, sometimes once, sometimes not at all. It was like playing mealtime roulette where the house always won and the prize was questionable soup. Fights over food happened daily. Desperate patients stole scraps from each other, leading to violence that guards usually ignored. Unless someone got seriously hurt, staff let patients battle over moldy bread crusts. Dinner and a show meant watching people fight over garbage while you ate actual food. The quality was deliberately poor. Spoiled vegetables, rancid meat, and contaminated water were standard. Many patients got sick from eating, but refusing food meant starvation. Guards claimed bad food was appropriate for mad people. Water was especially dangerous. Drawn from polluted sources and stored in dirty containers, it caused diseases that killed patients regularly. Clean drinking water was reserved for staff and visitors. Mealtimes became lessons in survival rather than nourishment. You learned to eat quickly before someone stole your food, to swallow without tasting, to be grateful for any calories that might keep you alive. But they weren't done with you yet. Rest wasn't part of the asylum experience. Patients became unpaid laborers forced to maintain the very buildings that imprisoned them, sweeping corridors, carrying heavy buckets of human waste, breaking rocks for construction. It was like the worst internship ever. No pay, no benefits, and your boss carried a whip instead of a performance review. Those who refused work faced immediate punishment, beatings with wooden clubs, shackling in uncomfortable positions for days. Guards made examples of defiant patients to keep others in line. The employee handbook was apparently written by someone who thought workplace safety meant the guards stayed safe from workers. Patients served as unpaid servants for guards and doctors, cleaning their quarters, preparing their meals, washing their clothes. The same people who treated patients like animals expected those patients to perform domestic duties perfectly. It was like having house servants who you also kept in cages and fed table scraps. The asylum operated like a business using patient labor to cut costs. Why hire workers when you could force inmates to do everything for free? Construction, maintenance, cooking, cleaning, all done by people supposedly too insane to function in society. The business model was basically free labor with a side of torture. And somehow this was considered medical treatment. Some patients worked skilled trades they'd learned before confinement. Carpenters built furniture for staff quarters. Seamstresses repaired clothing for guards. Their skills were exploited while they received nothing but continued imprisonment. Work never aimed for rehabilitation. The goal was control and profit. Keep patients busy and tired so they couldn't cause trouble. Generate free labor to reduce operating expenses. The workday lasted from dawn until dark with few breaks. Exhausted patients stumbled through tasks while dealing with hunger, illness, and restraints. But even after you finished your daily tasks, your day wasn't over. The treatment room was where medieval medicine showed its true colors. Bloodletting was performed with dull knives or broken glass, cutting patients until they fainted from blood loss. It was like going to a barber who thought your problem was having too much of that red stuff inside you. Burning hot irons were pressed to scalps and spines to chase out evil. The screaming could be heard throughout the asylum as heated metal seared flesh. The medical theory was apparently that demons were allergic to third-degree burns. Starvation was used as a reset method for violent or unresponsive patients. Guards would withhold all food for days or weeks, believing hunger would shock the mind back to sanity. The treatment plan was basically turning people into hangry skeletons and hoping that fixed their brains. The worst part was that doctors genuinely believed these treatments worked. Every scream was progress. Every sign of weakness was the madness leaving the body. Recovery meant surviving long enough to pretend you were cured. But when the sun started to set, a whole different kind of horror would begin. Sunset brought a different kind of horror, entertainment time. Some asylums charged admission for visitors to watch patient behavior. People paid money to see human beings at their lowest point. It was basically a human zoo where the admission price included a clear conscience and family fun for all ages. Guards staged performances using patients as unwilling actors. They'd force people to dance, sing, or fight for crowd amusement. Patients who refused were beaten until they complied. The entertainment industry was apparently founded by people who thought gladiator fights needed more mental illness and less professional training. Beatings often happened in front of audiences to demonstrate proper treatment of the insane. Guards would explain their methods while striking patients with wooden clubs. Visitors nodded approvingly as they watched human beings get tortured. It was like a medical conference, except the demonstrations involved more screaming, less learning, and no continuing education credits. Revenue from visitors helped fund asylum operations. The worse patients looked and acted, the more money spectators paid to see them. This created incentives to keep people looking as insane as possible. Evening entertainment could last for hours. Patients were forced to maintain performances despite exhaustion, hunger, and pain. And when the crowds finally left and darkness fell, you'd discover what true fear felt like. Darkness brought no peace, only different fears. Corridors went completely black because lighting was considered unnecessary for mad people. No candles, no torches, no moonlight through barred windows. It was like living in a horror movie, except the monsters were real, the exit doors were locked, and nobody was coming to rescue you. The sounds never stopped. Someone was always in pain. Others were lost in delusions that made them call out to people who weren't there. Some patients sang lullabies to comfort themselves. It was nature's cruelest lullaby playlist, guaranteed to keep you awake all night with nightmares as bonus content. Violence between patients increased at night when guards couldn't see what was happening. Desperate people fought over scraps of food, better sleeping spots, or simply from the madness of their situation. Night shift security apparently meant no security at all, just hoping morning would sort everything out. Guards only intervened if they heard sounds of serious injury. Maybe. Usually, they ignored patient conflicts unless someone might actually die. A few broken bones weren't worth investigating. The emergency response system was basically to wait and see if anyone stops breathing. Some people never survived their first night. The combination of cold, fear, hunger, and despair was too much for bodies and minds already pushed beyond limits. Death became a form of escape that many patients welcomed. Temperature control didn't exist. Winter nights were brutally cold with no heating. Summer brought stifling heat with no ventilation. Patients shivered or sweated through long hours of darkness. Sleep was nearly impossible. Even when exhaustion finally won, nightmares would wake you within hours. Dreams of freedom felt like additional torture when you woke to reality. But for many patients, there was only one way this story would end. When patients died, their bodies were handled like garbage rather than human remains. No ceremony, no dignity, no notification of families. Guards would simply drag corpses out of cells and dispose of them as quickly and cheaply as possible. Death wasn't even the end of your problems. Your body could still end up with a worse job than you had alive. Some bodies got burned in secret to hide evidence of abuse. Others were sold to medical schools for dissection without consent. The afterlife employment opportunities were apparently limited to medical school cadavers or unmarked grave residents with no pension plan. Families often weren't told when their relatives died. Some learned by accident months later. Others never found out at all. The asylum would simply stop accepting visits and refuse to answer questions. Customer service was apparently invented centuries after these places closed, along with basic human decency. Rooms were reused immediately after deaths. New patients got assigned to cells where previous occupants had just died, sometimes without cleaning the space first. Room turnover was faster than a cheap motel, but with significantly more bodily fluids and zero housekeeping. The death rate was astronomically high, but carefully hidden from public knowledge. Most patients who entered these institutions never left alive. Some patients simply disappeared without any record of death. Disease spread rapidly through overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. Plague, dysentery, and infection killed more patients than old age. The cycle continued endlessly. Each morning brought new patients to replace those who had died in the night. This was 24 hours in a medieval lunatic asylum, where survival itself was a miracle and humanity was the first casualty.